In today's podcast episode, we're going to talk about intermittent fasting and exercise. The thing about exercise is it's important to the weight loss journey, but it's not mandatory. So right now, if you are in a place where you can't exercise, this might happen because physically you just can't do it. Sometimes people have disabilities and things like that. You can still lose weight. I just want to encourage you that even if you cannot exercise, you can lose weight. The main thing there is if you choose not to exercise, just know that you're going to have to focus 100% on eating the proper amount of food. Now, intermittent fasting and exercise are compatible, but there are a few challenges that, you want to be aware of when you're asking yourself what exercise you should do. To give you a little background on my own story with intermittent fasting and exercise, on my 80-pound weight loss journey, I started off with the mindset that I had to burn off the pounds. I was like, it's just a problem of me not being active enough. So I really thought I've just gotta bust it. I've got to go and I've got to work really hard. I gotta sprint and I've got to do high intensity workouts, and that's all that's going to work. And by 2015, I was like, okay, I'm going to join a gym. So I did. I joined a gym. I started going every single day, and that was really good for me. It gave me discipline to get there into the gym, and I was doing hard workouts. I was doing CrossFit, like the workout of the day. Eventually, I switched over to just doing powerlifting because I loved it so much. I was lifting really heavy, and because of all this intensity and because I was really rushing myself, I ended up injuring my back. And suddenly, I couldn't do that intense exercise that I thought was necessary to do. And in fact, the only exercise that I could do without feeling just tons of pain was to walk. And thus, I started walking 6 miles a day. And that was the main exercise I did, really the only exercise I did, in order to go from 205 down to all the way down to 142. So my walk is not intense. It is 3 miles an hour, but it is a daily walk. Back in 2016, that's when I would do 7 days a week. And these days I do 6 days a week just because I like to take a day completely off, both from fasting and from my walk. Although I will go for a walk, on a Sunday if I want to. A really big mistake I was making in the beginning was I thought I needed to outrun my fork. And in fact, it was more important for me to get my eating dialed in. In other words, learning how to eat the appropriate amounts as opposed to just exercising. So you might be thinking, why even bother with exercise? Now, of course, we all know there are health benefits. You're less likely to suffer from various diseases if you consistently exercise. Also, you're going to have stronger bones and you're going to have stronger muscles. A big benefit that I have seen from it is just the everyday life being easier part. In other words, when you're in fairly good shape, you can walk all around the mall or, through Walmart or, getting your groceries, and it's not tiring. It's not taxing. You can just hold out better, and everyday life is just easier. Another benefit is that it can make fasting easier because fasting kind of creates this void, a period of time where you can't eat and you want to do something with that time. And so exercise can fill some of that time, and that's a good thing. But the biggest benefit that I have found when it comes to exercise is that it gives me a mental health boost. In other words, I'm in a good mood. When I go on my walk, even if I start out in a bad mood, by the end of the walk, I usually feel much better. And being in a good mood, consistently being in a positive headspace is so important on the weight loss journey because you're going to have rough days. The scale is not always going to cooperate. But if you can keep yourself in that positive mental state, you're going to be optimistic. You're going to keep going. You're going to keep taking those actions day in and day out because you're going to say, this is okay. It's going to be all right. I just need to hang in there. On the other hand, if you're in a negative headspace and then, maybe the scale shows a higher number for a day or a week, you're going to be more likely to quit. You just will. And it's really hard to make yourself do these things on a consistent basis if you are feeling pessimistic. So, if you can just get yourself out there and do some form of physical exercise, you're going to find that you're just more optimistic. And this is an important part of the weight loss journey. So let's talk about how to actually get yourself to exercise. What it really comes down to is that you need to be able to articulate to yourself what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're going to make it happen, and when and where you're going to do this activity. And if you don't have those questions answered in your head, you're going to find yourself day after day not ever really implementing because there's something there that's holding you back. So first, let's talk about the what. And this is where a lot of people get stuck because there are so many options. And of course, you're going to be hearing a lot of noise that, makes it seem like this one exercise is the only thing that will actually help you lose weight. And the thing is, it's really not important. It's really just about picking something that you're going to do. So whether it's going for a walk or going for a run or going for a swim or going to the gym or doing powerlifting, it really doesn't matter what you do as long as you pick something and you do it. And it's important that you're going to enjoy this. So if you, for a fact, know that you hate running, maybe like every time you've tried to lose weight, you go out and you start running, but you loathe it. Like your knees hurt, like my knees hurt. I enjoy running, but my knees hurt. So I can't really ever stick with it for a long period of time. But if that's just something that you've found, like you've tried this thing and you hate it, then don't do that thing. Figure out something to do. Figure out something that you'll enjoy. Because if it's something that you enjoy, it's not going to be a big deal to get out there and do it. Or at least it's less of a big deal. Because you'll be surprised at how often you'll want to make excuses for yourself. But if you already enjoy the thing, it's just going to make it just that much easier to get out there and do it. And so let's talk real quick about easy exercises versus hard, because there are benefits and disadvantages to both. Now, I particularly like easy exercises. What I have found is even though I enjoy intense exercise, I find it very hard to stick with it for a long period of time. In other words, like powerlifting or, CrossFit, things like that, I tended to get injured and I didn't stick with it over time. I think because it's such a mental hurdle to get over. It's like, okay, I've got to really have my energy up in order to go out and do this thing. Whereas with easier exercises, it's harder to give yourself that out because it's like, well, it's just an easy thing to go do. So for example, I pretty much know I can always get out there and go for a walk. I've never been so tired in the many years that I've been doing this. I've never been so tired that I literally say to myself, I'm too tired today to go walk. Now, the big disadvantage with an easier kind of exercise is that you may think it's not enough. It's not enough. It's not going to help you lose weight or whatever. So then you don't do it because it just doesn't seem like enough. And that's really where I was with walking in the beginning. I thought, it's not enough to just walk. I need to be doing something else in addition to it. But that just wasn't true for me. Now, there are some benefits, obviously, to really hard exercise. It can be mentally really rewarding to put yourself through a very challenging workout. And you can get some really good physical benefits from it as long as you don't push yourself so far that you start to get injured, which is a big negative of intense exercise. The chance that you're going to injure yourself is just higher. And there can be more of a mental hurdle to get yourself out there and do the more difficult thing. Like if you're tired or if you're kind of, got the sniffles or something like that, it can just be easier to let yourself off the hook. You're also going to need to figure out when you're going to do this. Now, this is probably going to be a bit of a challenge. Now, for me, I did not do a good job in the beginning of being specific with myself about when I was going to do the thing. For me, when I decided, okay, I'm just going to walk 6 miles a day, I told myself, okay, my deadline is midnight and I need to have 14,000 steps because that's 6 miles. And so I would just sneak the steps in throughout the day. I wasn't going out on dedicated walks and it was just, very different from day to day. I was being consistent because I was just saying to myself, come hell or high water, I'm getting these steps in. So it might be, 5 minutes before midnight when I was taking that last step, but I did do it. I have found that there is wisdom, though, in knowing exactly when you're going to do a thing. I have a very flexible schedule, so I'm able to kind of make every day different. But if you have a more rigid schedule, then you will be definitely helped by just finding that time that you can do the exercise, whatever you've planned to do, and telling yourself, this is when I'll do it. Now, right now, you might be saying, well, I don't have time to exercise, but I would challenge you that you probably do. The average American is watching 4.5 hours of TV each day, and they're spending 2.5 hours on social media. So most of us do have time. It's just that most of us are wasting a lot of our time. I am just as guilty as the next person. I use a lot of my time doing things that are not on task, just surfing the web or whatever it is. Now, a lot of people wonder, well, should I try to exercise in the fasting window or the eating window? Which one's going to be better? And there are advantages really to both. Ultimately, it's going to be whatever fits in your day better as far as what can you consistently do. But the big advantage of doing it in your eating window is that if you have tended in the past to eat out of boredom, you're just kind of a grazer, you're an emotional eater, then putting your exercise in the eating window will be good because then it's just less time that you're going to be tempted to graze. On the other hand, if you find the fasting window is a time when you really feel more tempted to, break the fast early and things like that, then it might be better to put your exercise in the fasting window. You also need to figure out where you're going to do this. So I, a lot of times, just walk inside my house. So I don't have to go to a place. But if you're going to go to the gym, you need to remember that you're going to need to factor in that time that it takes to get to the gym and come back from the gym and maybe shower also into your day. And if you plan to do your exercise outside, you need to come up with a plan for inclement weather. So if it's super hot outside, what are you going to do instead? Or if it's raining, what are you going to do? These are important questions to answer ahead of time so that you're not in a place where your plan just kind of falls apart. Now, how are you going to implement this? Because there may be other factors that you don't currently have handled that you're going to need to handle. For example, childcare. Do you need someone to babysit? Do you have the funds to hire a babysitter? And do you have a babysitter that will be available often enough? Or do you need to go to a gym that provides childcare? Or do you need to figure out something that doesn't require all that because you don't have it in your budget or you just don't want to put up with it? Also figure out what equipment you need. If you are going to, do some sort of weightlifting, and if you don't have weights and you don't want to get to the gym, then you need to get some weights and put them in your house. If you don't have appropriate clothing, which again, like for something like walking, you just need a pair of shoes, maybe. And you could walk barefoot inside your house like I did for a very long time. But, if you want to be walking outside, you need some sneakers and you need some loose-fitting clothing that is appropriate for a walk. If your plan requires that you get a gym membership, then you need to actually buy the membership. But a step before that might be that you need to research the gyms around you to figure out which one has the best deal and which one has the types of equipment that you plan on using. Now, let's talk really quickly about who. A lot of people like the idea of exercising with someone else, like, oh, I need a buddy to go out there and walk or whatever the thing is. Now, I am an introvert, so that's going to color my opinion on this, I know, but I think it's a dangerous thing to tie yourself to another person when it comes to trying to be consistent with exercise. The thing is, we tend to fall to the lowest common denominator, meaning that, if you choose a buddy who is going to say, let's not go for a walk, let's go over and get a pizza instead, you're probably going to get that pizza. It's going to be really hard to be kind of the stick in the mud and say, no, I'm going to go do my walk. So you need to know yourself really well. But I would encourage you to instead plan on your plan being to exercise alone. And then if people want to join you and you want them to join you, then invite them to do so. But, try to set yourself up for success as best you can. But I do understand that a lot of people like to have an accountability partner. So, if you have someone who already is really disciplined, that can be a benefit. Or, if you just want to buy yourself a fitness tracker, I have this one, which is a Zaruru. I've also used Fitbits, and I have found that to be really helpful because it keeps me accountable. It shows me like, okay, here's how much you moved today. So once you've answered all of those questions, then you should be able to implement your plan. Again, if you're not implementing, it's usually because you haven't answered one of those questions in your mind. Now, I don't want you to go overboard with your plan and make it something like you got to figure out the perfect thing and you got to like go out and buy all this equipment and you got to, get a $100 pair of shoes and you got to buy a $150 Fitbit and you got to get this $75 a month gym membership and you got to do all these things. It can be free. You can just say, okay, I'm going to get out and I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk every morning. And that can be the extent of it. It really can be. That's fine in the beginning. The most important thing is that you pick some way to get active and you become consistent with that. You can always add to your plan as you go along and you find what will work for you. And it's okay in the beginning if you're really out of shape and you need to sit down and you need to take breaks. The important thing is that you are getting yourself into a place where you're becoming a more active person. Focus on how you feel before, during, and after your exercise. Because if you can focus on those things, it will show you that you do feel better at the end of it. Hopefully you do. And if you don't, then that's also important. It might show you that you've picked the wrong exercise. The thing is, we don't like punishment. We're not going to punish ourselves day after day after day after day. So listen to your body. If your body is telling you, hey, I don't like this exercise, and it's telling you because you're in a lot of pain and you're kind of miserable and you find yourself making excuses, then listen to that. Change what you're doing. Figure out, maybe it's just a matter of making it easier on your joints. Maybe you should be swimming instead of running. Figure out what you'll do that you enjoy and that your body will thank you for. Now, I do want to say it's much easier if you just pick a thing and you do it every single day. Again, the tendency for us is to try to make things complicated and say, okay, well, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm going to do this. And on Tuesday and Thursdays, I'm going to do this. And Saturdays is going to be this. And then, throughout your week, a lot of times you're going to be really confused about what it is you're supposed to be doing. And it can just be just a mentally taxing thing. So instead, just keep it easy. Keep it the same thing every day. So it's helpful to ask yourself, as you're performing this exercise, how do you feel? Do you feel like you could keep up with this for the rest of your life? And if the answer is no, I hate what I'm doing, then, just change to something else until you find that thing that works for you. Now, there are some big challenges that can happen specifically with intermittent fasting and exercise. Now, the biggest problem that can happen is that as your calorie burn goes up, your appetite also goes up. Your body is always trying to just compensate. So if you burn more, you're going to get hungrier. And I know that's frustrating, but it just is how it is. And the fact is, if you're overweight, you've been consuming too many calories. You've been in that habit. And so what you're really needing to do in order to lose weight is to dial in your eating. In other words, you need to eat less than what you've been eating. And when your appetite is higher because of the intense exercise you've been doing, it's just harder to eat the right amount. Added to that, if you're doing intermittent fasting, you're going to have this longer period of time where you're not eating. So when you finally do sit down to eat, there can be a temptation to really eat fast and not really think about what you're eating and how much you're eating. And you can absolutely be exercising really hard and practicing intermittent fasting really consistently and still gain weight. And if you are gaining weight, the big thing to remember is you're eating too much food. But there are some solutions to this. First of all, just knowing that you are going to have an increase in appetite is helpful. If you just know this, you can be mentally prepared for it and not do that thing which a lot of us tend to do, which is to overestimate how much you burned and then feel justified in eating more. The best thing you can do is just forget completely that you did the exercise and try to eat what you'd be eating even if you hadn't exercised. Also, make sure that when you sit down to eat, you're not distracted at all. You're just focused on the food. You don't have screens around, TVs on, things like that. You're just eating the food and that's it. And if you're really having a hard time with it, then you might want to consider, for a while at least, going to a less intense form of exercise and seeing if that helps with your appetite control. Now, the second thing is being in a fasted state can make you feel weaker, which then can make exercise more difficult. Now, a lot of this, I will say, is a mental game, though. A lot of us can kind of think, well, I haven't eaten all day, so therefore I'm really weak and, it's going to be impossible to lift weights and things like that. However, Dr. Dominic D'Agostino did a 7-day fast, so a complete fast for 7 days, and then he deadlifted 500 pounds for 10 reps. So I tend to call myself out on that a lot when I think, oh, I'm so weak. But if you do find yourself making that excuse, just realize that you need to then figure out a different exercise, one that you can get yourself out there and do, because even if it is a mental thing, it's still important to recognize that it's like, okay, this is going to prevent me from actually doing that type of exercise because mentally I just can't get there. So I need to change the exercise to something that I do feel like I can do. One thing you can also try is to experiment with when to eat. So in other words, maybe you want to do your exercise right after you've broken the fast. Some people enjoy that. Some people hate that. But if the mental thing in your mind is like, I need to have food on my stomach in order to lift weights, then just put it after you've broken the fast. Now, another thing that can happen is that exercise makes intermittent fasting harder. So it is true that if you work out first thing in the morning and it's a really hard workout, then you're going to experience more hunger in the fasting window, especially if you have a very long fasting window, something like maybe you're doing your first meal at like maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon or so. That's a long period of time where you are kind of be depleted and you're going to feel hunger. Now, if you've been doing intermittent fasting for a while, you know that the hunger, it's not like a constant hunger. Hunger comes in waves. So, you feel that initial hunger. And as long as you're used to intermittent fasting, you don't panic. It's like, I feel a little bit hungry right now, but it'll go away. As long as you can be okay with that, the fact that you're going to feel that hunger, as long as you just don't eat, then it's really not going to affect your results. However, if you find yourself breaking the fast early because of this, then it means that you need to switch something that you're doing. So in other words, either, working on eating more in the eating window so that you feel less hungry during the fasting window, or maybe moving your workout so that it's closer to the time that you're going to break your fast. Remember, it's okay to experiment. If you find something's not working, give yourself permission to experiment until you find what does work. There's no reason to try to sit there and make yourself miserable, because really that defeats the whole purpose. The whole purpose of exercise is to give yourself a mental boost so that you stay in a positive mindset and so that you reach your goal weight. So I hope you enjoyed this episode about intermittent fasting and exercise. And I hope it's given you some practical advice on how to start exercising if you are currently kind of in a sedentary place. So thank you for joining me in this episode, and I'll see you in the next one.